Hello and welcome to Ambassadorship Training. My name is Brenda Ramirez. I am Assistant Director in Admission here with KHS, and I also serve as the point of contact for all things ambassadorship. Hopefully, you're here because you're seeking to be certified as a Scholar Ambassador. This is going to be the first of two easy steps in our certification process. Once you're done watching this training video, you'll want to proceed to complete the knowledge quiz, which is going to be found within our Scholar portal. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into an overview for today's agenda. As you can see, we're going to be covering 4 different topics. We will be reviewing the program and expectations as well as a calendar timeline of our programming events. We'll also talk a little bit more specifically about different ambassadorship opportunities as well as the sign-up process. We'll review ambassadorship do's and don'ts, and then we will wrap up or conclude with an overview of our resources that are going to be available to you during your time in ambassadorship. So let's start off with a quick overview. Ambassadorship does play a significant piece in our outreach and recruitment efforts, and it is going to be grounded in advancing the KHS mission. The mission to cultivate and support a multidisciplinary community of graduate students from across the Stanford community. The program delivers an engaging experiences that are going to prepare graduates to be visionary, courageous, and collaborative leaders who address complex challenges facing the world. Now, how exactly do we achieve this in ambassadorship? Well, our scholar ambassadors help us build awareness and foster connection with a variety of audiences, such as prospective applicants, admitted scholars, the greater campus community, and other external partners. We do offer a variety of outreach opportunities, which are outlined on the screen. These are going to include things like our admission officer events, or AOEs, our scholar admission events, SAEs, immersion weekend, as well as connections for admits, and lastly, sharing your story via the marketing team. Now, I'll talk about each of these in more detail in the following few slides, but first I do want to show you a calendar view of when these outreach activities actually take place. As you can see, AOEs and SAEs have similar timelines in that the outreach to prospective applicants really starts around March, and then it's going to expand all the way through the application deadline, which is typically in October. Now, if you are getting certified post the October deadline, which most of you should be since this is going live on November 1st, some of the first opportunities you will be available to participate in is going to be things like Immersion Weekend in late February and early March. That's going to be followed by our connections with admits, where we shift our focus from perspectives to those that have been admitted to join KHS. Now that you have a general understanding of the programs and timeline, let's review the specific for each of these programs. Starting with AOEs, you can categorize these as being led or moderated by an admission officer or an AO. These are going to be traditionally in the format of an information session. So that's the bulk of this time I'll spend talking about. But I also do want to point out that besides info sessions, we also host a variety of special event AOEs that may occur less frequently and where the event format does vary. This can include events such as our first year PhD open house, live scholar panel sessions. We also had a series of Leading Yourself and Leading Others across the US, where we did have some scholars joining us at some of those events. But again, the majority of the AOEs that ambassadors participate in are going to be in the format of an information session. These typically run about 60 minutes long. An AO will provide an overview of the program, typically via a PowerPoint presentation. This normally takes about 25 to 30 minutes. Then we have a panel of scholars join us for the last 30 to 35 minutes, where they get to share their experiences and then answer questions from the participants. Now, these sessions can take place in a variety of formats, including online via Zoom webinar. We also have in-person on-campus offerings, whether that's at Denning House or across the campus community. And then we also have in-person beyond campus opportunities. Of course, as admission officers, we do travel to different cities and host information sessions at public venues or other universities. So if you happen to be there, then you can work with that particular AO to participate. However, we do not provide travel reimbursement or funds to get scholars there. So just know that this is more on the basis if the opportunity presents itself, and if you're maybe traveling home or for a conference and you happen to be there when we are hosting one of these information sessions. Now, let's turn our attention to our SAEs, or our scholar admission events. So where the AOEs are organized and led by AOs, the SAE programs are hosted and led solely by scholar ambassadors. Now, these programs are, again, typically 60 minutes long and are going to take the format of a scholar Q&A session. You essentially will be answering questions from participants and sharing your experiences about KHS and just the general Stanford graduate experience. Essays can be done in a couple of different formats as well. You can have a virtual scholar Q&A, which is conducted via a Zoom meeting. An AO, more likely myself, Brenda, will set up the meeting details, and then I'll provide a calendar invite along with a promotional flyer that then you can share out with your social networks. We'll also promote this event through our social media pages and monthly newsletter that gets sent out to prospective students. Now, the in-person offerings are similarly formatted in that they're also a Q&A session, but this does require additional details such as space and location information. So if you are interested in hosting an in-person session, just know that this can be done both locally, so here in Stanford or the greater California area, or beyond campus if, again, you are traveling for some reason. If you need ideas for a venue or a location, please don't hesitate to reach out to our admission team, myself, or Christian, or someone else, one of the other AOs. We can definitely brainstorm some ideas and even potentially connect you with some of our external partners. We've also had a pair of scholars do a hybrid format SAE, where one scholar was in person at a venue, and then we had another scholar that was joining them via Zoom, and they both had an in-person live audience as well as a virtual audience. So this runs similarly, and it's the same time expectation. However, this does require that you secure a space that also has audio and visual capabilities. The other thing to note about these SAE events is that although you can host these on your own, that we do encourage you to have at least one other scholar with you or joining your program, just because this does help provide a multitude of perspectives based on experiences, since our audiences do tend to be global, especially if you're doing an online session. Now, to participate in an AOE or to host your SAE, the way that you sign up is going to be through the Scholar portal. So I am going to take a few minutes to sort of walk you through that process. So once you're in the portal and you essentially create your, or I should say, you get your certification, you're going to get an ambassadorship section that looks a little bit different. So under Get Involved, you'll have ambassadorship. You'll see that you'll have access to the calendar widget for the AOE events. Essentially, these will highlight any events that we're having, and you can register, and the details will be displayed on this side. However, right now, obviously, because it is past the October deadline, we don't have any live events, but once those go live, you will see those here and you can sign up accordingly. Now, for the SAE events, there will be a form linked in this section. Currently, that form is inactive because we are not hosting any outreach events since we are past the deadline. But once you are in there, you should be able to get to the form. So I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like on my page. So this is what the scholar admission event form will look like. Essentially, you will log in using your credentials to the scholar portal, and you can see that you have the different versions here. Now, with the online Scholar Q&A as well as the in-person Scholar Q&A, you will have another calendar widget where you can let us know your preferred date, and then you will add additional details in terms of time, if there's a specific audience you want to target, and anything else we should know. Now, you're also able to join an existing SAE. So if another scholar or scholars are hosting a scholar Q&A, that will be displayed up here as well as down here. Again, there's no confirmed events at the moment, so you do not currently see that, but you'll be able to copy and paste that information, and then we will add you to that calendar invite. So again, it's a very easy, convenient way to join other scholars and or create your own event. Now let's navigate back to the presentation. So now that we've talked a little bit more about those events, let's jump into the fun that is Immersion Weekend. There's going to be a variety of ways that ambassadors can get involved. Ambassadors in their first year of KHS actually have priority to serve as interviewers. So you will have the opportunity to participate if you're interested in. If not, or you don't have the capacity, we also have live scholar panels, or you can provide a general event support as well throughout the experience. As mentioned in the calendar overview, Immersion Weekend does take place in late February into early March, and being a group interviewer does require a 3-hour training in early February. So just keep that in mind. Currently, we are planning to have call-outs for volunteers at the end of the autumn quarter. So we'll typically do an announcement through the all-nighter, but we will also be reaching out to already certified ambassadors. So you just make sure that you have your certification done and complete by the end of the autumn quarter if you do want to be tapped for some of these opportunities. Now, of course, the fun does not end with Immersion Weekend. We, of course, then shift our focus from finalists to those that have been extended an offer of admission. And so one of the ways that we're able to cultivate early community building with these groups or these individuals is through our connections roster. This is a pretty easy but critical way for you to contribute to ambassadorship. This roster essentially collects information about our current ambassador scholars, where you're able to indicate which topics new admits can connect with you about. So this is going to be a very invaluable touch point for future scholars as they work on making an informed decision. You're also able to participate in any topic-specific panel discussions that we host. We talk about funding, housing, the international experience, and some of that relevant information that is being considered by these admitted scholars. Now, lastly, we do have the opportunity for you to share your story via our marketing team. This really allows us to showcase our multicultural and multidisciplinary community across a global audience. You can start by simply connecting with Stacy and Midori in our marketing team, and their information is available through the Scholar Guide. Now, before we move into resources, let's cover some do's and don'ts that you should keep in mind as you set off in your ambassadorship journey. We definitely value your time, and we hope that you will give the same courtesy to your audience. So please, please be sure to show up on time and to honor your commitments. If you do have a conflict and can no longer make your session, please be sure to secure a replacement and just communicate that with me. That way that communication can be updated for the appropriate scholar ambassador. The other thing to note is that you're not expected to know the inner workings of admission, so feel free to direct any of those admission-related questions to Brenda or anyone else on the admission team. We also ask that you share authentically and positively about your experience at KHS and at Stanford. We, of course, want to acknowledge the challenges and the complexities of this experience while still being constructive and providing an encouraging and positive outlook for those who are applying. Also know that responding "I don't know" is a perfectly okay response. If there are questions that you don't know the answer to, you can always refer them to our Scholar at stanford.edu email, or again to someone on the admission team. Now, in the same vein, don't feel that you have to answer every question, especially those that make you uncomfortable. So if there is an inappropriate interaction or an inappropriate question, you can always let one of the AOs know if this is something that occurs during your session. We also ask that you're mindful of your audience. We do tend to attract a pretty diverse group of candidates from across a global context. And so they can be at various points in their KHS application journey, whether they're very well versed in the program or maybe just starting to learn. And so we try to encourage you to meet them where they are, just based on your capacity. Lastly, be mindful of what you share on socials, not as much as it pertains to the content, but what what you're sharing, and that you're being expansive and inclusive with how you're sharing that content. Now let's go over some not okays. An easy one is, avoid showing up to your programs wearing any other institutional or university attire. We, of course, value and celebrate the institutional diversity of our community. But if you are representing KHS, we just ask that you try to avoid wearing other institutional branding during the session. Of course, we ask that you try not to share or project why you think you were selected as a scholar or what you feel the admission selection is looking for. We understand that there might be a lot of questions around this, but as you know, there isn't a blueprint for the ideal or perfect scholar. And there could be any number of criteria combinations of why a scholar is selected. So it's really best not to make assumptions on that end. And again, don't feel like you have to answer any questions, especially if you don't know the answer or they make you uncomfortable. We would also discourage that ambassadors review any individual application materials from prospective applicants, or that you provide any sort of private or one-on-one coaching, as this could cloud or distort their unique voice and create inequities within the application pool. This actually is a great segue, which brings me into my next point of thinking about some of those guidelines for engaging with prospective applicants. Now, we have a host of guidelines that are available through the Scholar Guide website. There are also additional tips on how to respond to certain requests, so definitely take a look at that on your own time. But just to get us started with sort of an overview of a good starting point is, share your details about your KH experience if you can and are willing to. You're really going to be the best and most credible representative of the experience. And so we, of course, hope you will share, but understand if you cannot or prefer not to. So please just politely decline from these requests and refer prospective applicants either to our website, to another admission ambassador, or to someone on the admission team. We also would guide you to share any sort of general advice about preparing the application. We, of course, encourage you to steer clear of any sort of specific application contact or coaching of individual applicants, because again, this could distort their voice as they're going through the process, which is what we want to avoid. We actually want to highlight their unique perspectives and experiences. We, of course, always strive to consider fairness and equity within our process. So where possible, share your experiences in a public forum, then and also make sure that you are maybe trying your best in reaching the widest audience possible, the more open and more equitable this process can be for applicants, the better for just in terms of representation and access. We're definitely happy to work with you to share your story via our marketing channels so we can continue to include and expand that access. Now, lastly, you of course may endorse or caution against an applicant if you're willing to go on the record. We have no formal referral process. However, we do welcome informal notes that then get added to the applicant's file. Now, where the applicant will never see these notes, just know that they will only be available to those that serve on the KHS selection committee. And now, as a final disclaimer, just know that specific application coaching would recuse a scholar from serving as an admission ambassador and an immersion weekend interviewer. It becomes a conflict of interest for us to feature scholars as official admission representatives who are also then providing individual application coaching or sharing/advising on individual applications. Now let's wrap up to where you can find more resources if you need a refresher or if you're just wanting to learn a little bit more. Now, I had already talked a little bit about the Scholar portal and how you can navigate to the ambassadorship content site. I would also highly encourage you to navigate to the Scholar guide. We do have an admission page. That is where you can find the specific guidelines I had mentioned. So you can see from the screen, we have a host of question and answer guidelines, and then we also provide some FAQs. And lastly, you of course can find additional descriptions for the different type of programmings that we host. Lastly, we'll of course have these training video and slide deck available to you, as well as you'll get added to the KHS Ambassadorship Slack. We also encourage you to reach out to any returning ambassadors as they can really give you good guidance on the sort of questions and how they answer those requests. And lastly, of course, our admission team is always available. If you have specific questions or want to brainstorm ideas for outreach purposes, please don't hesitate to either shoot me an email or send me a message on Slack. Now that concludes the end of our certification ambassadorship training video. Now you're ready to take the knowledge quiz for the end of your certification through the Scholar portal. Just want to take the time to thank you for your time and commitment in helping us spread the word of KHS and in growing our wonderful community.